All right. Hi, everyone. Hope you're not feeling too tired. I know it's been a long day. We're heading towards the end here. But hopefully we can make this interesting. My name's Sebastian. I'm the CFO and COO of Alex Therapeutics. We're a Swedish medtech startup specialized in developing digital therapeutics. So before I get too much into the details here of the actual talk, I thought it'd be good to provide some context. So first up, what are digital therapeutics? So very briefly, digital therapeutics are software-based medical interventions. These can come in the form of diagnostic tools. This can be web-based applications, software applications. Most commonly, they come in the form of mobile applications with an intended medical use. Basically, what I'm saying is they're very, very fancy apps. But a little bit more context here. They're apps that provide a medical purpose. They can be used for diagnostics. They can be used to treat medical conditions. They can provide companion support if you're undergoing a pharmaceutical traditional drug treatment. So why is this relevant here? Who here in the audience has heard the term move fast and break things? Raise your hand. Anyone? Okay, if you didn't, you might need to look up, honestly, your startup history lesson. Move fast and break things is the motto made famous by Facebook when they were growing quickly in the beginning. Basically, it's an ethos where you say that it's fine to release something that isn't perfect. It's fine to do something half-shot because you want to get out on the market extremely quickly. Once out there, you can iterate, you can learn, and then you can develop, and you can build in customer feedback, and you can constantly get better. You don't need to have everything figured out. And this was done incredibly successfully by Facebook. I think it might be causing them some headaches today, but overall, this is one of the reasons where they are where they are. It's the reason everyone here has their app on our phone. And it's an ethos that's been taken over and copied by thousands of other startups, and often very successfully. You want to get out there. If you have an innovation, you have limited resources, you need to move very quickly to put your product, put your service in the hand of the user so you can learn, so you can iterate, become better. But there is a pretty big downside with this approach, and you don't need to think more about it than actually listening to the name. You move fast and you break things. So what do you do if you're in an industry where you're not allowed to break things? Where the stakes are so much higher, where it's not social media, but you're dealing with someone's life, where you're dealing with critical infrastructure or anything that is so important that essentially messing up is not allowed. That's the case of our industry. And this applies to quite a few. You can look at energy, you can look at transportation, defense, but in this case, I'm slightly biased towards the one that we're interested in, life science. See, when you're dealing with diagnosis, when you're dealing with pharmacological treatments, when you're providing standalone treatments to patients that are ill, that are suffering from chronic conditions or any other kind of disease, you're not allowed to make that mistake. And that's the issue here. How do you move fast when at the same time you're incredibly constrained? We like to joke internally when we're developing products that there's a lot we can do, there's a lot we can do well, but there's one thing that separates us from our competitors when we're talking to other startups. We're not allowed to fuck up. And that's something that we have built into our company ethos. So I thought, before coming here and deciding upon this as the topic, I spoke with a couple of my colleagues, and we were saying, okay, so what does this actually mean? How has this impacted the way that we work? And we basically summed it down into 4 key lessons that I thought I'd bring up with the crowd here and share with you. These are pretty generally applicable. It doesn't matter if you're in life science, if you're in transportation, energy, any sort of what we like to refer to as highly sensitive industry. And quite frankly, they're pretty relevant for everyone else, but they're particularly so here. The first lesson, and this is very broadly applicable, but it's doubly important here, and I'm going to come to that, is you need to understand the value that you're bringing to the table. If you're a startup and you've identified and you're getting into one of these spaces, it's most likely because you'll have identified an underlying need or a dysfunctional aspect of the market that you're getting into. But without fail, any market that suffers from these highly regulated, high-stakes environments, it's not going to be an easy market. It's not going to be simple. There's going to be a built-in complexity to it. And this is very key here, because you're going to have identified one area, one section, and you need to focus 99% of your energy in this area. For us at Alex, we saw a medical device industry, or more particularly the niche within it, which is software as medical devices. We saw development processes that still used a waterfall development method that hadn't been updated for the past 3 decades. We saw design and development processes where you had pharma executives and you had paid doctors and investors sitting 50 steps removed from the end patient who had no understanding of how their product would actually end up being used, who dictated something, sent out the specifications, and then were shocked when patients didn't actually end up using the end product. We saw more in general design and development processes that had never heard of functional UX or UI, had never heard of a patient interview. And this is what we took with us and we brought in. This is our core as a company. We are a medical device manufacturer who come from a consumer background. This is what we bring in and what we keep in mind in everything that we do. And this is what you need to do as well. Identify what it is that your key competency is. And this comes to the second lesson. Everything else, ignore it. Everything else, put that aside. Find a way to keep your focus where it should be. For us, we do this by finding partners. We develop software as medical devices, and basically there are 3 steps here: development, clinical trials, and commercialization. We can do the best development in the world. We can build amazing software medical devices, digital therapeutics, that the end users love, that patients are going to use, that are going to improve their quality of life, it's going to improve treatment adherence. Running clinical trials, though, we have no expertise for that, and it's incredibly complex. So we found partners. Commercializing digital therapeutics, dealing with national reimbursement systems, dealing with essentially different national regulators and all the complexities, talking to payers. We have no experience in that. And if we wanted to vertically integrate into doing all of that, we'd be stretched way too thin. So we found partners. In our case, we partner with pharmaceutical companies who are experts in both of these areas. But innovative design, agile development, this is alien to them. It's abstract. And that's our value. The third thing, and this is something that really came up when I was discussing this with my colleagues, is feedback. What I've just described is a highly regulated industry, and that's going to be true in any case where you're stuck with these constraints. And it becomes incredibly easy in that scenario to sort of throw your hands in the air and say, yeah, but it's hard. You know, we can't really build in feedback. There are all these national regulations we need to apply to. We have these strict requirements, so let's not do it. That's what we heard 1,000 times when we were developing. You can't do agile development when you're stuck with national medical device regulations. The EU has this thing called MDR, Medical Device Directive, which is incredibly strict in how everything has to be structured. Everyone pointed to it and said, yeah, but you can't go and do this. You can't build it that way. Don't take that excuse. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. They're going to say, but you can't release a beta version. You can't do what you essentially, and this is the reason you move fast and break things. You release something and you learn from it. It's going to be incredibly easy to take that excuse and let that lead to shoddy product development or poor services. You need to find a way around this, because this is key to any successful company. You need to find a way to not only launch your product, but learn from it, improve from it continually. For us at Alex, the way we did this is that we took incorporating patient input into our product development processes to the entire next level. So we built this in from the absolute day one. We started running mini clinical trials called pilot studies before the final version so that we could gain that functionality input. All of this was something our competitors had basically said, yeah, but it's tricky, it's hard, it's complex, let's not do it. We took our technical documentation, which, for those of you who are familiar with life science space, is or everything that you need to write down that you can then give to a regulator at the end of the day. We took this and we designed it in a way so that we're allowed to essentially iterate. We're allowed to be agile throughout the development process. Don't take the excuse. You need to find a way to build in this sort of feedback loop. The fourth and final lesson, and this is going to sound a little bit weird coming from me, seeing as I'm up here on stage, but that's going to be don't listen to industry insiders. And this is true of any space that you're going into, but it's perhaps especially true when you're going into what we've termed as high-stakes industries. The reason is when you're working in a regulated space, when the requirements placed upon you are very strict, when you have these thousands of different stakeholders that are all telling you it can't be done because of X, Y, and Z. Though the laws are too strict, you're bound by these guidelines, these processes, these standards. It's going to be very, very easy to take that and just listen to it. For us, it's the medical device regulations. It doesn't matter if we're dealing with the FDA in the US, MDR in the EU. These rules and guidances are incredibly strict in how they're read. We went to essentially quality and regulatory consultants, and everyone told us and these people told us one thing, we went to some others, they told us another thing, but the one thing they all had in common was everyone was saying, no, it's too complex, you're not supposed to do this. You're basically you're trying to drive innovation where the system has been set up to disallow it. You're not allowed to innovate, you're not allowed to move quickly in this space. I cannot tell you, and I cannot emphasize enough, how wrong they were. And I'm not saying this because we somehow broke the rules or we found a cheat code. We didn't. We just came in with a new approach. Everyone else had been doing this for so long, they were so ingrained in their mindset. And this is true of any industry where you're moving in and innovating. You wouldn't be there if you weren't convinced that you could do something better. I mean, quite frankly, what are you doing at this conference if you're thinking like an industry insider? You're supposed to come from the outside. You're bringing something new to the table. You've identified what your key value it is that you're bringing, and that's what you should focus on. So I really want to round it off by saying, when it comes to getting inputs in these sort of high-stakes, sensitive industries, be humble, listen, learn, and then do your own thing. Because nobody is going to know what value you're bringing to the table better than you are. Thank you.
So let's see if there are any questions as well. Hopefully you've all been asking questions. So let's see. And the answer is no. That's the usual answer. So, okay. Well, you said obviously not to listen to people like what insiders say in anywhere. So do you think that there's anything that people should listen to? like not just let's say not the things that people say you can't do, but what people say you should or can do.
Absolutely, and I can perhaps clarify and provide a bit more context here. You should always have an open mind. You should always listen. You should always learn, but you need to have a certain degree of almost arrogance when you're going into an incredibly complicated and difficult industry. You need to have I'm Swedish. In Sweden, we call it pannben, which is like when you have a forehead that you just ram into the wall. You need to be pretty stubborn in this regard. So when you hear from an industry outsider or insider that something is impossible, you need to have that mentality in the back of your head. Why are they saying that? You need to question it. You need to have that fundamental, but I think I can do better mentality. So yeah, sometimes you should listen to
because someone just asked a similar question of if we shouldn't listen to professionals, who do we listen to then?
So you need to be selective in who you listen to and when you listen to them. Basically, if we go back to the second point, is you need to identify what it is that you're bringing to the table and what it is that you've essentially decided to outsource. Whatever you're outsourcing, if that's not your core competency, professionals all the way, fantastic. But what you've decided to bring to the table, what you've identified is the value that you're contributing with, here it's really, really important that you stay true to your character as a company, to your identity. If you are, in our case, bringing innovative and agile development to a system that doesn't allow it, we were told multiple times that this wouldn't be possible. We just had to stick with it until we found a way to make it work.
Okay. And talking about moving fast and not breaking things in this sort of area, was there ever a point in your company where you were like, oh, we have to take a risk. This might break or not. How often does that happen, that you sort of still have to take the risk just because of time restraints or anything else?
It can absolutely happen. It's a balancing act, as with all things. You need to find that balance between quality and speed, between essentially guaranteeing the end product versus still you have deliverables to meet. I think the mentality change has to be an understanding that perfection isn't something that you need to achieve, but the quality of where you can say, now we can release something, now we're ready, that has to go from being, we're fine with a whole bunch of missing functionalities, we are fine with bugs everywhere because we just want to get the feedback, to, okay, I need to be prepared to put this, to take my baby that I've built, give it away for 6 months, which is what you do when you run a clinical trial, and I'm not allowed to touch it. There can't be bugs. There can't be any missing functionality. There can't be anything that you're thinking, okay, I'll fix this along the way. It needs to have that standalone capacity from a very early point.
Okay. And another question coming in from the audience as well. You can still ask questions, by the way. How do you determine that your company is headed the right way without breaking things? Is it the feedback, the testing, or something else?
I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, you can have a whole bunch of fancy KPIs, but the market is going to tell you if you're doing something right or not. If you're gaining the traction that you're seeking, for us, whether it's new partnerships, or if we are essentially gaining the clinical results we have, and ultimately how our products perform on the market. But there are always going to be fun ways to test yourself, and you can give yourself easy metrics. But at the end of the day, the market tells you whether or not you're doing good enough.
Okay, and do you think you've had, as a company, an impact now on the way things are actually, processing in the healthcare or your specific department?
I absolutely think so. It's hard not to be arrogant in this space. We've also been, quote unquote, lucky enough. We got into the digital health area just at the start of 2020, right as everyone remembers when COVID came. It hasn't been a bad time to be working with digital health. Everyone has had an increased adoption, and you can talk to people who 4 years ago wouldn't have ever imagined being able to speak with their doctor over an app, who are now fine gaining entirely standalone digital treatment. So we've been fortunate, we've had the win behind us, but looking back, there's been a paradigm shift in the industry when it comes to this approach.
And do you think your sort of approach can sort of easily be taken and carried over to any other sort of sector or department of activities?
So I try to make this as general as possible. We have a whole bunch of very life science specific tips. Trust me, if anyone has questions there, you can reach out and ask. But I think the general mentality that we're talking about here of identifying what it is that you're doing well or what it is you want to change, but understanding also that the complexity of everything else, you're working with limited resources, so you can't do anything. You need to find a way to outsource that or bring in that competency from the market. So finding that balance is, I feel, highly transferable to other industries as well.
Yeah, because that was interesting, because you said that you came from basically a customer background, right? A consumer background. So is that all you sort of took? Hey, I need to consume stuff as well. How can I make it possibly easier?
No, so like I said, Digital Therapeutics, at the end of the day, they're very, very fancy apps. Our first investors and our core culture as a company were the King founders, who I'm not sure if you're familiar with them. They built Candy Crush. Trust me, they know a thing or two about making good apps. And that sort of mentality, that approach to process development and to design and development has been very core and fundamental to our company.
That's an interesting overlap from a mobile game.
They built one of the most addictive mobile games ever, and we treat addictions.
But it's very good. Karma. If you play that for too much, you need
exactly.
the health app probably. But thank you very much for your time. This was good to hear.
Thank you.
Thank you.